Shalom friends, and welcome to A Small Sanctuary. I'm Rabbi Esther and I'm continuing this series on the sacred table. We have had conversations about veganism and vegan Shevat, the Jewish answer to veganuary, but I would like to broaden the scope a little bit again and go back to that original premise of the sacred table. Obviously, ethical and ritual consumption is part of the sacred table. It creates mindfulness and it can actually create transformation and justice in the world. And I really do want to emphasize that no sacred practice can be divorced from the ethical imperative. But apart from certain dietary choices, we've talked about kashrut in a previous video extensively and veganism extensively, there are other elements to building a sacred Jewish table culture in your homes. The whole premise of A Small Sanctuary is that Judaism isn't just something we do at synagogue. And trust me, I love synagogues. Synagogues pay my mortgage. I am a very committed congregational rabbi. I love congregational life. But part of congregational life is the recognition that congregational life needs to feed into the home, and the home needs to feed into congregational life. And the rabbis already in Talmudic times acknowledged these two pillars of Jewish living: the synagogue as a place for gathering, learning, and prayer, and the home as a place of sanctification and intentional Jewish living. I think especially since the COVID-19 pandemic, we've all reassessed our relationship to the home and what it means to build a home culture. And that is why I'm inviting us into some of these conversations. Now, let me just be really clear about what I mean by home and how inclusive I want to be in that definition of home. The home and the sacred path of the Jewish householder is not only restricted to a certain type of family. It's not only restricted to what we might call a heteronormative, nuclear, middle class, mommy, daddy, and kids setup, i.e. the setup that I live every day in my life. I have a husband, I have 3 kids, I'm part of the middle class, but I actually really want us to broaden the definition of home. Home as a sanctuary, as a safe place, a soft place for us to land, a safe place for us to be who we are in beautiful, deep, emotionally resonant and sacred relationships with others. And so homes go far beyond just one particular family structure, which in and of itself, frankly, is a fairly modern invention. Throughout Jewish history and human history in general, we have seen families in many shapes and constellations: extended families, chosen families, adoptive families, tribal families, families spread out across several homes, families living in compounds and villages and, suburban dwellings and whatever it is. The home as a unit is incredibly versatile and diverse, and I think it's really important to invite everyone into that sense of home. Friends living together, flat sharing is a home. The LGBTQ family is a home. Siblings living together is a home. A dorm at university is a home. All of these categories can be expanded, and I really believe in an inclusive Torah that invites everyone into that conversation. Home is a home, and Judaism has a lot to say about how we can make that home kind and loving and sacred and special, and a place of human flourishing and connection to the divine. So that's kind of my little mission statement right there on why I want to talk about the sacred table. And of course, our sacred homes branch out to give life to the further community. There is no firewall between the home and what happens in the street and what happens in the marketplace and what happens in the academy and what happens in our houses of worship and even what happens in the halls of power. All those things know a ripple effect from the home. And I think it's really important to reclaim and hone our thinking on what supportive, loving families and home life looks like through a Jewish lens. So yes, home is also the place where we educate, where we build community, where we engage in sacred relationships, where we welcome in others, where we disseminate Jewish teachings, where we bring people close to God or people close to the ultimate, whatever that is. And that is not always God for everyone, but to the essence of their life. So here are some frames I would like us to think about the sacred table. 1. The sacred table as a transformative act for self, family, and community. I've already talked a lot about that in my preamble. Essentially, being conscious of the generative power of our homes is the first step to really thinking about how we set this sacred table. And there's not one way to set the sacred table. There is no aesthetic ideal, and it doesn't need to look like something out of a magazine or a Pinterest board or the perfectly curated Instagram feed. A home can be sacred and messy. A home can be sacred and lived in. A home can be sacred and ran on a shoestring budget. A home can be sacred for single people. Again, it's not about limiting our definitions, it's about expanding our definitions and switching on that consciousness from, well, this is just a place where I eat and sleep, to actually, this is a beating heart of my life. This is the hearth of my sacred intention, is really powerful. Number 2, the sacred table as a community builder. Pesach is not that far away. Pesach is one of the most universally observed Jewish holidays in the American Jewish community. And I'm not talking about synagogue seders, I'm talking about home seders. Home seders are instant community builders and widely loved in the Jewish community for good reason. Seders are awesome. And so, glancing forward towards Pesach a little bit, I want us to think about the sacred table as a community builder. Who do you invite? Who do you nurture at your table? Maybe it's family and friends. Maybe it's a spiritual seeker. Maybe it's someone returning to Jewish practice. Maybe it's someone exploring Jewish practice and considering conversion. Maybe it's your fellow congregants. Maybe it's a one table or Moshe house event for other young Jews in the area, but they come into the home and find that nourishment and that spiritual connection to the Jewish tradition in the home. Being intentional of how you think of your home as a place where you lift up your Judaism and you lift up other people, whether it's for Jewish edification or love or justice or welcoming or just a soft place to land. Yes, the Jewish home and the sacred table can absolutely be a community builder, and our festivals and Shabbat lend themselves very naturally to that. Number 3, the sacred table is a just table. And this is why I have been experimenting with vegan Shabbat and talking about the social justice implications of kashrut. The sacred table is a table that examines our power relationships to each other, our relationships to the natural world, to the human community, to people who may have more than us, to people who may have less than us, and how we bring righteousness to our table. The sacred table should not be a table that is defiled by cruelty or immorality. The sacred table is a just table. 4, a sacred table is a loving table. Mealtimes can be stressful, especially for young families. Picky eaters, toddler tantrums, decompressing from a stressful day at work or home or school. All of those things are destabilizing forces that we bring into the sacred table, and that can unsettle us. And that's also okay. The sacred table doesn't need to be a perfect table where there is never any, machloket, any disagreement or argument or little bits of healthy family drama. But at the end of the day, having that sacred intention when you sit down to eat, that this should be a loving place, a place for conversation, a place for checking in with each other, for listening to each other and being present with each other. That really, I think, is where the magic happens. And I also want to say, you don't have to do this for every meal, all meals. You can be selective about which meals you want to eat at the sacred table and how you want to eat at those meals. Most people are rushing around from activity to activity, grabbing something on the go, maybe crashing on the sofa, with a snack or a TV dinner. Those moments can be sacred and powerful too. The sacred table, friends, is a loving table where we are there for each other. 5. The sacred table is a fun table. Just because something is sacred and we have a certain degree of reverence doesn't mean you can't laugh and make jokes and be silly and goof around. One of the things that's most sacred to me and my family is after we have had our Shabbat dinner, it's become a custom in our family for all of my 3 kids to goof around on the living room floor and play around until they're tired with each other. They'll make big kid piles and they'll cuddle each other and horse around, and my husband and I just sit basking in the candlelight and watching that, and it's just lovely. I really want to decouple the notion that religion is dour and austere and serious and, has to be done in certain proper conventional ways. Let's set all of that aside. Spirituality can be fun and enlightening and light. As I like to call it, I believe in irreverent reverence or reverent irreverence. The sacred table has a sense of time and place. Of course, this refers a little bit back to what we were talking about in terms of when you choose to set your sacred table and how you choose to set your sacred table. For some people, that might be Thanksgiving or a special family gathering. For other people, that might be all about Shabbat and festivals. For some people, it might just be Pesach or Hanukkah. Whatever it is, your mileage may vary as long as it gets you to the destination where you want to be. And just having an analytical moment, analyzing what those key moments are in your families or in your home's life and dynamic allows you to have a sense of time and place. Last but not least, number 7, the sacred table is a purposeful table. And of course, that also loops back to what we talked about previously a lot in this video. But having a sense of purpose, and purpose doesn't always need to be lofty, but having a sense of purpose will help you be the architect of that sacred table. Is it going to be game night? Is it Shabbat dinner? Is it homework with cookies and tea or hot chocolate when your kids come home from a day at school? Is it for a meeting? Are you involved in community building or community organizing or faith-based organizing in some way, or congregational life, and you have a committee meeting? What does it look like to set the sacred table for that? There are so many junctures that we can explore having a purposeful table. But as long as you're intentional about it, that is what makes sacred acts sacred acts. Now that we have spent this series studying the sacred table together, I just wanted to hop on quickly and add some final practical thoughts on how to actually build your own sacred table. We've talked a lot about the ideas, the principles, the ethics, the spirituality of building your sacred table. But how do I build my sacred table with my family? There are 6 concrete ways in which I foster a sacred table with my kids and my family. Number 1, song. We do a lot of singing at the Shabbat table as a family, and it is a great way to bond and to educate and transmit the values of your family and your community. I highly recommend starting to do Birkat Hamazon, the grace after meals with your kids on Shabbat, or even a shortened version like Brich Hamana, which I will try to find the link for and link it for you in the show notes. Another one is prayer. I would like to deepen a connection to prayer at the sacred table. I do pray with my children when not seated at the table now and again, not very frequently, but around the bedtime Shema and sometimes in the morning when they see me pray, or at night when they see me pray. But definitely incorporating a more intentional sense of grace is an option for building that culture. Of course, saying blessings and prayers for Shabbat or even weekdays over your food and drink is another way to enhance the prayer culture of your sacred table. Learning. This is a big one for my family. We work with Devash, the Torah commentary that's issued for children between 7 and 11 years old by Machon Hadar from New York, and we really love that. We do it at the table sometimes, we do it on the couch sometimes, but that has become a really meaningful Shabbat practice for our family and my kids. and myself really enjoy it. And I always come away learning something new there too. Games. We play games at our sacred table, especially on Shabbat. Maybe it's board games or maybe it's card games. Uno is a big hit in my family. Using the table as a way to entertain yourselves and bond as a family is really powerful and fun. Kids love that. I have so many fond memories of playing games with my family, especially card games. Crafting and creativity. We do a lot of crafting, a lot of arts and crafts, often tied in with the Jewish holidays. And we sometimes get a subscription box from Days United, which gives us just that little impetus for crafting. We are big into crafting, Jewish crafting, non-Jewish crafting. I love it. When my kids craft at the table, I give them a nice hot drink or a little treat. And last but not least, in my family, is tea time. Because of the nature of my work, I'm not always able to have dinner with my family. And so that moment, I move intentionally to tea time instead. They come home. I will try to have a homemade baked good if I can. And we sit down for a cup of tea and a sweet treat, and we debrief their day. And that is a really precious moment to me. And I feel really blessed that I can continue that tradition. And I hope that is helpful to you as you think about your own table culture in your own house, where we connect with each other as loving human beings in that space. Over to my concluding thoughts. In conclusion, friends, let me end with a story from the Talmud that will frame all of this. In 70 CE, the Romans destroyed the temple in Jerusalem and razed and burned down the city of Jerusalem. And there was one rabbi who had vision and thought ahead. His name was Yochanan bar Zakkai. And he argued with the Roman authorities to be smuggled out in a coffin to a little place elsewhere in the land of Israel at the time, which endured brutal Roman occupation, to a little town called Yavne. Now here's a little pun. Yavne actually means he shall build. So there is a pun in the name. Yavne was a nincompoop little town. It had no reputation. It had no resources. It was nothing. But he said to the authorities, "Give me Yavne and its sages." So out he goes, smuggled past the burning and crumbling walls of Jerusalem to Yavne. And of course he's let out of his coffin and he journeys there. There he starts gathering back the people who've been so broken by this trauma of occupation and destruction. And right there, the project of rabbinic Judaism was formed. And the rabbis of the early Mishnaic and Talmudic period knew that they needed to rebuild from scratch after the Churban, after this destruction, and re-envision a new model for doing Judaism. And their template was bringing the temple back into the Jewish home and creating what they would call a Mishkan or Mikdash Me'at, a small sanctuary where the table became our altar and the hearth became our place of prayer and learning and community. That is exactly the project of a small sanctuary. In my humble, tiny little corner of the internet and through my rabbinic work, I want to make people feel empowered that the sacred table is not just a newfangled idea. It goes back to the core of who we are as Jews and our ability to innovate, our ability to relate, to connect, to love on each other. So when you set your sacred tables, think of all of the sacred tables that have been set throughout Jewish history under the widest range of circumstances, from deep oppression to great liberation, and then set your own with Jewish joy. Thank you for being with me today. You know what to do. Like and subscribe if you like this content, and let me know in the comments down below, how do you set your sacred table? What are some of your practices? And wishing you only blessings. Shalom uvracha, with peace and blessing from my house to your house.